First bill on the calendar for the day is House File 4404. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 4404, number 6 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to capital investment, the second engrossment.
I recognize the member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl, to introduce his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd like to start out by thanking those who have worked on this bill, nonpartisan staff, Deb Dyson, Andy Lee, the committee legislative assistant, Jennifer Groblish, GOP research, Jason Rector, DFL, Jenny Nash, the committee administrator, Gavin Hansen, and of course, the DFL lead, Alice Hausman. And I would also like to recognize at this time one of our committee members, capital investment committee members, who has come off basically the injury list to be with us today. Representative Lilly has a firm belief in the importance of capital investment, and again literally got off his sick bed to come here to vote for the capital investment bill today. So thank you, Representative Lilly, and thank you for coming here.
With much happiness, I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Lilly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chair Erdahl. I'm one lucky person. I very easily could have been on the other side. Just really thank you, everyone, for thoughts and prayers. And both sides of the aisle, you guys have, I know we duke it out pretty hard here, but both sides have just been absolutely amazing. And the conversations have been priceless to help me get through. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. We just came home Saturday, and it's nice to be home, but I'm not there. I'm standing on my own feet here, but I got to lean here. I got to tease Lyndon. His record's safe. I'm never going to beat him because I missed some legislative days. So he's going to be champion. But no, really, thank you, everyone. Again, both sides of the aisle, I got this great card from one of the Republican staffers. I love it. It says, heard you took a spill out of a tree. And it's just really, but everybody's been great. And I just feel so lucky. All sides, from the speaker to our leader and all staff members, and everybody's just been really great. So I'm sorry to go on about your bill. I know it's your moment, but it's just neat how many people really, we all love Minnesota, and that's why I came in today, and I'm just really honored to serve in this body.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Lilly. I will continue now with my bill introduction. You know, there's a lot of songs get bandied about, and I was thinking what would be a good capital investment song. I thought Bridge Over Troubled Waters, Take Me Home, Country Roads. Someone suggested Can't Buy Me Love. But I've settled on With a Little Help from My Friends. And so, I believe through the help of the committee, we did a very good job writing this bill within the confines of $825 million. And that's about the average amount for an even-numbered bonding year. The bill is fair and balanced geographically and politically. It is heavy on infrastructure, addressing many of the brick and mortar needs of Minnesota. 30% is asset preservation, 31% transportation, thanks to the addition of trunk highway bonds, 13% is water and conservation. Those three categories, asset preservation, transportation, and water, 74% of the bonding bill. I stayed within the recommended priority listings of the University of Minnesota and Minnesota State. There is more Public Facilities Authority funding in this bill than ever before at $120 million. Red Lake School is funded, as is Pillsbury Hall and Fort Snelling. We fund $25 million in school security, and we include funding for mental health crisis centers. This is a good bill. $825 million, a little Freudian slip there. $825 million is a lot of money, and I urge your support of the bill.
Representative Uglum, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, would like to urge that everyone vote for this bonding bill. This, the chair and the committee and the staff has put together an excellent bonding bill. And I guess I don't need to remind you that right now interest rates are on the rise. The cost of money is going to be more expensive next year than it is right now. And it behooves us to have a robust bonding bill, and that's what we have before us today. The priorities are there, taking care of what we own. Obviously, that is, you would do that with your own home, and that's what this bill does for the properties around the state. It also helps the environment with clean water programs. It helps many other facilities throughout the state, the DNR, obviously the schools, and I think its priorities are in the right place. I would urge everyone to get behind this bill and move it forward. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hertaus.
Mr. Speaker, personal privilege.
State your privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Lilly. Representative Lilly, welcome back. And I just wanted to say you really had me choked up with those words, saying that that you almost went to the other side. And I know that falling on a tree won't make you a Republican.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Grosso moves to amend House File Number 4404, the second engrossment, and the amendment is coded A13.
I recognize the member from Clearwater, Representative Grossell, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this amendment provides for the vets homes out of the Stadium Reserve. This financing is long overdue for a part of our population who are willing to give their lives or give a part of their lives so that we can enjoy the freedoms and rights we enjoy today. I'm looking for all green on this amendment, as it serves those who are more than willing to serve us and continue to serve us.
There is an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Hortman moves to amend the Grossell amendment to House File Number 4404. The second engrossment as follows. The amendment to the amendment is coded A30.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Minority Leader Hortman, to your amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Grossell. The amendment to the amendment provides the full amount of funding to make the veterans' homes a reality. While this is a very problematic revenue stream for us to be relying on, and my hope is that we can get to the general obligation bonding level that we need to actually do these projects. I think on both sides of the aisle, we're very committed to making sure our veterans have what they need, and these veterans' homes in particular. So rather than provide only part of the funding to get the job done, what the amendment to the amendment would do would be to add to the Grossell amendment to get the whole job done so that we could get the federal match and do the homes. And I would love if we had a fully green board. And I look forward to hearing from Representative Erdahl his thoughts on the amendment to the amendment.
Discussion to the A30 amendment. The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in a spirit of bipartisanship, I support the amendment to the amendment, and the amendment urge green votes on both of them.
Further discussion to the A30 amendment. The member from Hennepin, Representative Anderson S.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I'd like to request a roll call on the amendment.
Roll call being requested, and seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Horton, I appreciate you bringing this amendment forward. Though I don't agree with your assessment that there's more money that's needed for the veterans' homes. We have heard countless testimony on the veterans' homes in State Government Finance Committee, with testimony from the communities that have documentation from their architects for their veteran homes saying this amount is the right amount that we have in Representative Grossel's amendment. But I do appreciate your willingness to use the Stadium Reserve funding for the veterans' homes. So with that in mind, members, I'd encourage a green vote.
Further discussion to the A30 amendment. Seeing none, a roll call being requested on the A30 amendment. The clerk will take the roll call on the amendment to the amendment. Murphy M. votes aye. Clerk will close the roll. There being 124 ayes and 0 nays, the amendment to the amendment is adopted. Members, we return to the underlying A13 amendment. Discussion to the amendment as amended. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I stand in total and complete support of the amendment as amended. I do believe, as Chair Anderson S. said, that these numbers, the testimony we had throughout the committee process are correct, but just remember that, I mean, one could say it's too much of a good thing, but I say too much of a good thing is a good thing. So with that being said, members, please support this. This is a very, very important amendment, the Grossell amendment as amended. Please vote green.
The member from Beltrami, Representative Bliss.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank Representative Grossell for bringing this forward. We need to move forward now. These men and women have sacrificed so much. We need to step up and provide the funding so that we can take care of them in their time of need. Please, members, vote green. Thank you.
The member from Candy Ojai, Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd also like to thank Representative Grossell for bringing this amendment forward. This is important, members. We funded a home for the Minnesota Vikings for about $1 billion, and there's some remaining funds left over. And now that we've funded the Minnesota Vikings, it's time that we fund homes for our veterans as well. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Anderson S.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to request a roll call on this amendment, please.
Roll call being requested, and seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Anderson S.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the last vote that we just took, 124 House members voting in favor of using the Stadium Reserve for our veterans' homes. I appreciate the strong support of doing this. We have 3 homes that are in desperate need for these communities. I think about this, and I think about the day my dad died. This was back in 2011. I got the call the Saturday that session, it was the last Saturday of session, and got the call that my dad had fallen and he didn't have much longer to live. Session ended that Monday. I drive home and I spend time with my father in the last moments of his life. And I got to tell you, it was a moment I will never forget, because I think about the opportunity that my mother had to be with my father at that time, that she could drive home every night, but she could be there the very next day, right away in the morning, so that he didn't have to be alone in these last moments. And that's what we're doing with these veterans' homes. We're making sure that those that fought for our freedom, that they're not going to be alone in their last moments of life. So I appreciate your support and encourage a green vote.
The member from Washington, Representative Detmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Grosso for bringing this forward. As many of you know, that my heart is with our veterans of the state of Minnesota. And we've been working on these projects. If you compare the number of years we've been working on these projects with the 3 different communities that we're looking at here, is about 20 years. 20 years that we've been working on bringing more veterans homes to the state of Minnesota. A quick story. We were traveling around the state. Chair Anderson was taking the committee around the state Government and Finance Committee, and we stopped at one community out in western Minnesota. I believe it was in Wilmer. And we had an open mic session. A World War II veteran stood up and took the mic and then sat down with the mic. He was well-spoken, very polite, but straightforward. When he made the comment that's going to stick with me for a long time, he said, ladies and gentlemen, by the time this veterans home is being built, I won't be around. He's in his mid-90s. And it will take, with getting the request sent up to the federal VA, it could take up to 5 years before we see our first new veterans home. But he said, it's not for me. It's for the veterans that are following me. And members, our younger veterans are watching what we're doing. Our younger veterans are watching what we're doing. Because you can tell the character, not only of a nation, but a character of our state can be judged by how well we treat our veterans. Thank you.
Any further discussion? The member from Washington, Representative Jurgens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Grosso, for bringing this forward. I support the amendment, and I also want to point out that there's $10 million in the underlying bill for asset preservation at existing veterans' homes. That's a good start. We need to also take care of the asset preservation and deferred maintenance at those that we already have. And so hopefully in future years we'll be able to do even more to take care of those homes, such as the Hastings Veterans Home. But thank you, Representative Grosso.
Further discussion? Seeing none, a roll call being requested. The clerk will take the roll on the A13 amendment as amended. The clerk will close the roll. Omar votes aye. There being 124 ayes and 0 nays, the A13 amendment as amended is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hansen moves to amend House File Number 4404. The second engrossment as follows, and the amendment is coded A19.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And before I do the amendment, I want to make sure as I've done in other steps of the bill since a provision was added, disclose that I do own property next to an appropriation proposed elsewhere in the bill. To the A19 amendment, this is not, this is within order of the bill. This is affecting on page 65. There is a provision in the bill that relates, it's not bonding. If you look on section 32 in the bill, and what I'm doing, there's $1 million in general funding provided to an entity to essentially do permits, it looks like, to review permits to a municipal joint powers organization or an educational institution. So in the bonding bill, here in section 32, we have a provision that shouldn't be in the bonding bill. And what the A19 amendment does is it substitutes a provision that I know you've heard of for several years now, $1 million to the state highway that goes through West St. Paul. So it would take the dollars that are provided to MESRB or an educational institution or a municipal joint powers organization and spend them on a project that was a state highway making a payment there. And I would ask for a roll call on this provision.
A roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, I understand that there's always a lot of need throughout not only the metropolitan area, but greater Minnesota for a lot of these funding mechanisms and dollars. And whereas this may be certainly indeed a good project, I really think that we are dealing with the metropolitan issues as best we can, and actually in some cases I would say better. I would just respectfully ask the body to vote no on this amendment. Let the process run through. The bonding committee has worked on all of the aspects of it, and I think this is an appropriate time for us to say no on this particular bill. Please vote no.
The member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this section, it's on page 65. The funding side is probably very important, but what it deletes is exceptionally important. This body is being asked to put millions upon tens of millions of dollars into water treatment, into PFA across the state so that the waters that we have are cleaner and the communities that we serve rates don't go up as high as they could. MPCA does make mistakes, folks. Representative Petersburg stood up. The city of Owatonna in their permit had a $50 million mistake that it was going to cost the people and the communities and the taxpayers across the state of Minnesota. And what this provision does is really focus in on the study and the science of what is the cost of what is being written into these permits, so that those numbers would be provided as before the cities sign off on their permit, would understand of what exactly they're getting themselves into, what exactly they're getting their taxpayers involved in, and also what is the potential cost to the state as they assist those communities in the construction of those projects. I would ask for a red vote on this amendment, and I'm thankful that we have a roll call because I was going to ask for one as well. So just please stand up for your small cities and towns across the state who want this language, who want to be able to understand what the costs are to the communities and what is being implemented on them by the department. Thank you.
The member from Dakota, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm rising to speak in favor of this amendment. The proposal with regard to Robert Street has been vetted numerous times through bonding proposals, and the need gets greater every year. If anybody spends any time on Robert Street, and I certainly do, it's adjacent to my district, you couldn't find more commerce and small business going on. It's a remarkable place of innovation and small businesses and the community supporting independent business owners. And I will tell you, navigating Robert Street is a challenge, and there are numerous safety issues that have been raised over the years, and Representative Hansen has advocated for this for years. But this is really a vote for supporting innovative small businesses that are cropping up and being nurtured along Robert Street, and we need to do what we can to make sure that their customers can get to their businesses and that the people who are navigating Robert Street, one of the most traveled corridors in the Twin City metro area, really needs our support. So we need to stand up for our small businesses.
The member from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. I encourage a green vote on this too. I can remember, even as a young person, driving with my family up through Robert Street, and it's a way to get to the metro. It isn't necessarily just a metro project, but when you live out in the country, in the rural areas as well, you can take that path. It's a good path into the Twin Cities, and I think it's important that we take care of all of our roads, that we spend money that will enhance these projects, and this is something that's been waiting for support for some time. Also, on the question of whether or not the appropriation that was talked about before, I have concerns that, in a sense, what could be happening is an attempt to sort of buy science, not necessarily look at science. So I'm concerned about what that provision is doing as well, and I think we need to take caution about that. And so I encourage a green vote for this bill amendment.
The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members, and all through the process of many of the amendments that we have today, we've made choices of what we can spend based upon the targets that we have. And so as we make these discussions, it's simply a matter of what our committee decided we should be doing at this time with the money that we have. However, specifically on this one, and for those who are talking about the need for public safety and the traffic hazards that might be relevant, we need to realize this important fact, and Representative Hansen can correct me if I'm wrong, but what you are talking about, the needs are already there. The request here is for a reimbursement to pay the city for what they have already done.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Erdahl, you're correct. This is a reimbursement because the city of West St. Paul had to cover the cost for a state highway to complete the highway. $17 million, a town of 20,000 people. So that cost is going to be borne by those businesses that Representative Halverson mentioned and by the taxpayers, many of whom are on fixed incomes. I have one of the oldest districts in terms of age in the state. I think, members, and we've had similar amendments, this is cash. And I understand, Mr. Chair, you've made choices. So the amendment is within those choices. You have a very limited amount of cash that's in the bill. Now, this morning, I think you raised that amount of cash in Ways and Means, so I know that that's possible. But what my amendment does here, and what the next amendment do, is they change some of those appropriations within the budget that you have. So I would ask members to look on page 65 and look at 65.21 and 65.22. So we've talked about this being a bonding bill, and I think the words were a robust bonding bill. But this is not bonding. This is providing $1 million to review water quality regulations and national pollutant discharge elimination system permits. It's not bonding. And where's that money going to? A grant to any higher education institution or municipal joint powers organization. So $1 million going to somebody of general fund. What I'm asking for with this amendment is to spend that, to give that to reimburse the city of West St. Paul for the dollars, and it's not going to cover $17 million. It covers $1 million. $1 million to help with those costs that were borne by a city for a state highway. I'd ask for a yes vote.
Further discussion? Seeing none, a roll call being requested. excuse me. Member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman.
Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for a call of the House.
Call of the House being requested and seeing 15 hands, 10 hands. Clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. Members, we return to discussion on the A19 amendment. There is a roll call on the amendment. Discussion. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the A19 amendment. The House is under call. Members, please vote. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 53 ayes and 74 nays, the A19 amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hanson moves to amend House File Number 4404. The second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A22.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hanson, to the A22 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The A22 amendment again deals with West St. Paul. What this does is it's Representative Erdahl, it's not changing your overall numbers here. It's within an appropriation of $5 million for inflow and infiltration, and it's dedicating a portion of that to a lift station. And so it deals with kind of the, as you know, West St. Paul has had inflow infiltration issues, but because of the debt that's incurred because of Robert Street, it doesn't have the dollars, it doesn't have that capacity for matching for these large competitive grants. It has been somewhat successful in the smaller ones. So Representative Erdahl, I'm not going to ask for a roll call on this. I'm hoping maybe out of the warmth of your heart that maybe you would take this. It's not changing the overall numbers. It's just dedicating a portion of it that would help out my constituents in West St. Paul.
Discussion to the A22 amendment. Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And while it pains me a little bit because I do have a warm heart. As Ms. Scoville said to me in 4th grade, not today, Dean. So sorry, but I have to urge a no vote today.
Further discussion? The member from Hennepin, Representative Dean R.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I appreciate the advocacy work that Representative Hansen is doing for his community. You know, we put West St. Paul in a place many years ago when we put it upon them to actually fund a state highway that's, as in the previous amendment was mentioned, which is a key piece of commerce, small businesses, all those things that, you know, we fight for here at the Capitol. And there was something that was mentioned by the Chair Erdahl last time, is that all we have is the money that we have for bonding. Well, that's not true. That's actually the money that we chose to allocate towards. So just like making tough decisions in a bonding bill, we have to make choices. The Republican majority made a choice to set the size of the bonding bill. So I would just ask that members support this. It's time that we actually do what's right for the people in West St. Paul. And again, I would ask for a green vote.
The member from Hennepin, the Majority Leader Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the call of the House be lifted.
Pepin motions the call of the House. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. No. Motion prevails. The call of the House is lifted. Discussion to the A22 amendment. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, again, if you take a look at the A22 amendment, it's dedicating dollars for a lift station, pre-designed design, acquisition, installation of replacement equipment, dollars that the community doesn't have because of the massive debt that it's incurred building a state highway for the people of Minnesota. So I would ask for your support.
Further discussion to the A22 amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor of the A22 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. Motion is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Erdahl moves to amend House File Number 4404, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A24.
Recognize the author of the amendment, Representative Erdahl, to the A24.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment just changes the appropriation of some funding and spreads it out a little bit more to some other projects. For example, it adds the St. Peter HVAC project in the dietary building. Adds $5 million for the Minneapolis American Indian Center and various other changes that we decided to make.
There is an amendment at the desk, amendment to the amendment, the A26. The clerk will report the amendment.
Erdahl moves to amend his amendment to House File 4404, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A26.
Representative Erdahl, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These are technical changes to my author's amendment. Basically pays for the debt service and the trunk highway bonds.
Discussion to the A26 amendment to the amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor of the A26 amendment to the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hartman moves to amend the Erdahl amendment to House File Number 4404, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A18-0916.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman, to your amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Which number is this one?
This is
0916? Mr. Speaker, members, this amendment would change the amount allocated for Reinvest in Minnesota, the RIM funding, I believe, from $10 million to $30 million.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Creasure, what purpose do you rise?
I rise to a point of order on this amendment. Because the allocation increases the spending and we don't substitute it, it's out of order by Rule of 4.03, subsection H.
Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. So, members, I understand this morning that the Ways and Means Committee met and had an opportunity to increase the budget resolution to make room for all the projects that should be in this bill. And Mr. Speaker, the Ways and Means Committee can get together at any time and make that adjustment. So I think we should vote for this. And then once it goes on, then the Ways and Means Committee can scamper on back to committee and increase the amount in the budget resolution.
Representative Creasure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Advice?
State your advice.
That may in fact be true, but they haven't. And since the budget target hasn't been increased, it is out of order.
Members, on the point of order raised by Representative Creasure and having listened to advice by Representative Creasure and Minority Leader Hortman, I find that the point of order is well taken. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hortman moves to amend the Erdahl Amendment to House File Number 4404, second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A18-0918.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the prior amendment would have helped to leverage up to $69 million in additional funding for the state of Minnesota. This particular amendment would add $16 million to the bill to build the Department of Agriculture, Department of Health lab, providing construction jobs and also needed infrastructure for the state of Minnesota. But I have a feeling that Representative Creasure is ready to hop up and make an objection. So, Mr. Speaker, I would at this point in time withdraw the A18 that would provide $16 million for the Department of Agriculture that the Republican House has decided not to fund. The A19, which provides $1.15 million to the Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College, which the Republican majority has decided not to fund. The A28, the A32, which is a $50 million construction project, the A33, which would fully fund the Department of Military Affairs requests, the A34, which would increase the housing infrastructure bonds by $60 million, and that would be all the amendments to the amendment I would withdraw at this point, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Hortman withdraws the A18-0919. the A28, the A32, the A33, and the A34. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Moran moves to amend the Erdahl Amendment to House File Number 4404, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A18-920.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Moran, to your amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am hoping that we can give this some consideration. And I hope that we can align around some shared priorities as we continue to emerge and thrive as a 21st century regional community that works for all of us. And my hope is that as legislators, that we can invest into the future of Minnesota by working together to ensure that our capital city remains a vital center of commerce that welcome visitors to our region from across, not only across the state of Minnesota, but from across the country and from across the world. So this bill has really broad support, who are willing to support the City of St. Paul 2018 bonding request of $58 million to construct a new River Center parking ramp. So a little bit about the River Center parking ramp. The River Center parking ramp really is a vital statewide asset that serves more than 2.1 million visitors per year that do come from across the state, from across the country, and from across the world. Through the vast array of activities at the River Center, the Excel Center, and the Science Museum of Minnesota, the Orthway Center for Performing Arts, and even the surrounding restaurants, hotels, and other businesses that it serves, this ramp helps generate an estimated $12 million in state revenue. Originally, the ramp was built in 1970. The River Center ramp is quickly nearing the end of its useful life. City engineers have determined it will require complete rebuild by 2020. So we really do need to start now. In the last 18 years alone, the City of St. Paul has spent more than $15 million for maintenance and repairs just to keep the ramp safely open. To build a new ramp, the city has committed to matching state investment dollar for dollar, but the full $58 million bonding proposal is needed to meet the full project cost of $116 million. This investment will help continue the momentum of our state, leverage the strength of the many businesses and cultural institutions that rely on the ramp to survive, and create more than 300 construction jobs in 27 different trades.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
Representative Cretia, state your point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise to a point of order. I heard about these shared goals. I don't know that our side would share the goal of a $58 million parking ramp when we couldn't get our PFA and some of our infrastructure and rural facilities in there. But nonetheless, we are adding $58 million, and I would raise to a point of order of 4.03 under Section H that we are indeed increasing the scope of this without the budget.
Representative Moran.
Mr. Speaker, and Representative Cretia, I realize it is out of order, but and I'm willing to withdraw the amendment to the amendment. But I hope that I can be allowed to just finish my statement and then withdraw.
Mr. Speaker, I'll withdraw the point of order if she's going to withdraw the amendment.
Representative Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so I talked a little bit about the broad support that comes from a coalition, which includes state labor, business leader, cultural organizations, the bipartisan political support from both the Metro and Greater Minnesota. We have heartened that the Minnesota Senate has included partial funding for the ramp in the capital investment bill that was released this month. And I just hope that we, as we think of more regionally, that we will see this as an investment, not only to some would consider St. Paul, but that is needed across the state of Minnesota. And so with that, I would like to withdraw the amendment to the amendment. Thank you.
Representative Moran withdraws the A18-0920 amendment. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hansen moves to amend the Urdahl amendment to House File Number 4404, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A35.
Call upon the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The A35 amendment is similar to the one we heard earlier this afternoon. This particular one provides money for a lift station for the city of West St. Paul, $1.65 million to help out with the community on dealing with their sewage issues. So I would ask for your support. It is general obligation bonds, 1.65, and I'm assuming Representative Krisha is, I don't know, was that pop-up or scamper? But let me address to Representative Urdahl. So again, as the minority leader mentioned, today you were able to adjust the budget resolution. And here's one thing that could be done to add some additional dollars and to provide help. I know there are many members who have projects. This is just one that an enlarged bill would help out.
Representative Krisha, what purpose do you rise?
Groundhog's Day, actually, because that's what this feels like. Mr. Speaker, I rise to a point of order on 4.03H. While earlier there was an amendment to adjust the budget target, we actually can't keep doing that in retro. So I rise to a point of order that this is out of the scope in the budget according to 4.03H, even though I agree with the idea and I wish we could do more of these.
Representative Hansen.
Mr. Speaker, I'd actually like you to rule.
Members, having heard advice from Krisha as well as Hansen on the point of order under 4.03H, I find the point of order well taken. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hansen moves to amend the Urdahl amendment to House File Number 4404, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A36.
The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The A36 amendment relates to funding for Concord Street. So I want to make sure I'm not confusing anybody between the state highway that's Robert Street and Concord. Many of you may remember driving along Concord when the stockyards were there. That road really hasn't been changed. It's under reconstruction again right now. This amount of $3.93 million would help out with that project that goes through both mine and Representative Frankie's district. So I would ask for your support.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Krisha.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
State your point of order.
And Mr. Speaker, and I'll be very clear on why this is 4.03, should be ruled out of order for 4.03H. In here, the effects of the bill previously recommended cannot increase or decrease the revenues without offsets, and we are not offsetting, so we'll put the bill in out of balance, and for that, while I may come off as the bad guy, I am just paying attention to the rules. So with that, I would ask that you find the point of order well taken.
Discussion to the point of order. Member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Advice?
State your advice.
Mr. Speaker, I think what we're seeing here from the series of amendments is a crying need for more investment throughout the state, and a real challenge in communities, not just Representative Hanson's, but others as well. And so, Mr. Speaker, I understand the arguments made by Representative Krisha, but I'd point out that the challenge is the limitations that are imposed in the resolution, and what I'd suggest, Mr. Speaker, is that you find the point of order not well taken and allow the committee to go back, then adjust the resolution to meet the needs of the state rather than not meet the needs of the state, as we're seeing with this series of rulings. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further advice, Representative Krisha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Pinto, it would be a lot easier if you raised these point of orders for me rather than I had to each do one.
Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Parliamentary inquiry.
State your parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What would be my remedy? We had a bill that did, or an amendment that did take from an existing account that was voted down, and now I have had this is my second amendment seeking additional dollars. What is, as a member of the legislature, what is my remedy what procedurally may I do to try to achieve this funding?
Representative Hanson, you're certainly capable of appealing the ruling of the chair, but on the point of order, it says very explicitly in section 403, paragraph H, that what Representative Krisha has stated is correct, and I will find that the order is well taken. There's amendment at the desk.
Hanson moves to amend the Erdahl Amendment to House File Number 4404, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A37.
Recognize the member from Dakota. Representative Hanson, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The A37 amendment is for $3.7 million to reimburse the City of West St. Paul for the traffic signals that were installed on the state highway.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Krisha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I rise a point order to the same ruling. I would hope it apply that we are putting the bill out of budget balance, and for that I rise to a point of order of 4.03H and would ask that you find the point well taken.
Mr. Speaker, advice?
Representative Pepin.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Krisha is right. This is out of order, but I would suggest to the author that all of the additional amendments are the same situation. So to save time, I would suggest withdrawing all the amendments. Just a suggestion.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, advice.
State your advice.
Representative Krisha made reference to the bill being out of balance, and I want to make sure that we note for members of the public and certainly for you, Mr. Speaker, that this is a different situation than the other bills that the body is considering, in that there's not really a balance in the sense of this is a decision by the majority, by the legislature, as to how much should be borrowed to make the investments that are necessary in our state. We know that based on past bills that have been passed, if we adjust them for inflation, they'd be a significantly larger amount of money than the amounts that we're talking about here. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'd suggest that you consider an exception to that with respect to this particular bill and the bonding bill. It's a different situation, and would urge you to find the point of order not well taken. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, on the Krisha point of order raised on 4.03H, listening to advice from Krisha, Pepin, and Pinto, I find that the point of order is well taken. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hanson moves to amend the Erdahl Amendment to House File number 4404. The second engrossment as amended as follows. The amendment to the amendment is coded A38.
Call upon the member from Dakota, Representative Hanson, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The A38 amendment is similar to the one that Representative Hortman had offered earlier relating to the Reinvest in Minnesota program, where we're leaving federal dollars on the table, and I would ask for your support.
Representative Krisha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise to a point of order for 4.03H for said reasons above.
Members, the point of order raised by Representative Krisha under 4.03 subparagraph H is well taken. There is an amendment at the desk. Clerk will report the amendment.
Hanson moves to amend the Erdahl Amendment to House File number 4404. The second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A39.
I call upon the member from Dakota, Representative Hanson, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is actually Representative Frankie bill that we had put in together for dollars to the city of South St. Paul for a new library. I know the Capital Investment Committee of both the House and the Senate visited it.
Representative Krisha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And again, I rise to a point of order on 4.03H and would ask that you would find it well taken.
Members, Krisha raises to a point of order on a 4.03H. Having listened to advice from Representative Krisha, I find the point of order well taken. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 4404. Oh, yes.
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Members, the question for the is on the underlying amendment, the A24 amendment. My apologies. Discussion to the A24 amendment. The member from Clay, Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I just briefly would like to speak to line 1.7 of the amendment. This would take down the total appropriation of the bill from $7 million to $500,000 for a Clay County waste facility. This is a project that the county's been working on for a number of years. In 2014, we got $600,000 from the MPCA to do some study and get the project ready to go. The project is shovel ready, so I just hope that if this bill does continue, as this bill goes through the conference committee, we can get the funding for this crucial, vitally important regional project back in play. Thank you.
Further discussion to the A24 amendment. The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd request a roll call.
Roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Further discussion to the A24 amendment. The member from Hennep. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the A24 amendment. The clerk will close the roll. Lilly votes no. There being 97 ayes and 29 noes, the A24 amendment is adopted. There are no more amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 4404, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill as amended. The member from Ramsey, Representative Hausman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I would just add to Representative Lean's hopes about as this bill continues its move forward to restore that particular part of the bill. And with hopes for some more room, I'd like to call attention to a couple of other things just with some of the motivation behind it. One is the Bowser request for the $30 million for RIM. That would leverage $69.9 million of USDA funds. This bill gets us only a third of the way through, so I'm hoping we'll keep an eye on that one. This is a voluntary program, but there are already $55 million worth of applications. Another is the affordable housing requests. MHFA initially requested $30 million for public housing. Public housing has waiting lists all over the state. The public housing is housing that serves some of the lowest income residents of the state, including many seniors, persons with disabilities, families with children. Nearly 75% of the residents have incomes under $15,000 a year. More than 90% of that housing is over 20 years old, so the need for rehab is incredible. The housing infrastructure bonds, because we partner with nonprofits, leverages very often $3 of private money for every $1 of state dollars, and we are only half of the way through there, 50%. We hope that as the bill continues to move forward, that we'll take another look at HEAPR at the University of Minnesota and Minnesota State. There are a few critical safety projects not yet there. One of them is Safe Routes to School, which we never are terribly generous about, but again is desired all over the state. There are some economic development opportunities. Representative Davids and I care about the lack of funding for the Chatfield Center for the Arts and Hennepin Center for the Arts. We know in Minneapolis and in Chatfield, they know that arts and culture are part of what keep them economically healthy and competitive. But one of the ones that I'd like to spend a little more time talking about is the fact that at this point, the bill funds no transit, none of the bus routes, none of the arterial bus rapid transit. It doesn't fund passenger rail. Here in this area, we are falling behind our economic competitors all over the Midwest. In cities and states, including those governed by Republican mayors and governors, they're all moving ahead of us. So Michigan and Indiana and Illinois, Kansas City, St. Louis, Denver, Wichita, Kansas, towns in Texas, all want transportation alternatives. They want to be part of the passenger rail network, and the cities that are bypassing us very rapidly on public mass transit. And so the lack of even arterial bus rapid transit in this bill is something that the business community knows will eventually hurt us. They have been speaking up. I hope that they speak up with a little more force. But right now, this is a bill that we hope is a bill in progress and process, and that we still have some opportunities to look at some of those parts of the bill.
The member from Dakota, Representative Wills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And as we look at the bill before us, and we had a lengthy debate, I think we can all say that none of us is perfectly content or happy with the bill, the way the bill is. Some of us would like a little more for certain projects. Some of us feel like it's spending too much. And to bring all of the stakeholders to the table, all of us members together to find a bill that can work is no easy task. And so I want to thank Chair Erdahl for working hard to put together a bonding bill that I believe most of us can feel good supporting. And it's a bill that focuses mostly on infrastructure. It's 74% of the bill is looking at common sense brick and mortar projects throughout the state of Minnesota. We're looking at transportation infrastructure, water and conservation projects. We have $25 million for school safety grants, $25 million for mental health crisis centers, and $22.5 million for police training centers. All very important things that we need to be supporting in Minnesota. And members, of course, I would be remiss if I did not mention the Minnesota Zoo. You see the handout on your desks outlining the asset preservation requests and also the Revitalize the Zoo request. And the bonding bill contains $10 million, which is not the full request that the zoo had and my bill had, which I'm disappointed with, but I am glad that we do have the $10 million that's going to go towards asset preservation, working on improving the exhibits that are crumbling and falling apart, deteriorating beyond repair. The HVAC systems and life support systems all need to be updated. And so I appreciate your support today for the many different projects in this bill and ask members to please vote green. Thank you.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Lilly.
Thank you, Speaker and members. Wow. How about Representative Liebling? I believe her speakers had a little more use, so we'll try this one. She's not here to defend herself. She might get a shot in my rib or something. Mr. Speaker and members, you know, I asked to be on this committee, and I'd like to thank the Speaker for putting me on capital investment and minority leader. I asked because I really wanted to get around and see the state of Minnesota. I really think we're really blessed with a great state, and we had a chance to get around, and it's just amazing what you see. I remember being up in Representative Fabian's district and hearing about DigiKey and eating some of the mayor's beef jerky, and we get to see Hamilton's and Schumacher's big pipe down there, and we get around and the twine ball, of course. But we just seen all sorts of stuff. We heard about this little one-room classroom way up in the northeast quarter of Minnesota, and wow, what a story. And I never knew we had so many members that are actually went to school in one class schoolrooms. I think there was like 3 or 4 just on our committee. We ate Representative Paul Anderson, where are you? Your wife made some amazing cookies. I remember that day vividly, and thank you for that. But it was such an honor to meet your people, every one of you. We were all over the state. I just want to thank the back of the bus caucus. We got this little bunch of goofballs that are in the back of the bus. And Detmer, Representative Detmer and Lewick, who proudly served our country in the military. And I don't know if you know about, you get to know members, and Lewick, I didn't know much about him. He had, where are you? I can't even see you. Where are you? Thanks, buddy. I live in a suburban district. He has bears that come in and attack his cattle. I know nothing about these sort of things from from where I live, but what an honor to learn about it. Frankie and Juergens, they're in the back of the bus, and Juergens is he's gonna get mad at me for saying, but he's from South Dakota or North Dakota, or one of those darn Dakotas. but he was a state cross-country champion. I mean, think about that. I mean, what a great thing to learn about somebody. Uglum, I know you're retiring. These are these goofballs in the back of the bus, and he's one of them, but we're going to miss you, Uglum. You asked some brilliant questions with your knowledge of just the weirdest thing that you were just experts on, like pressure of pipelines and different of infrastructure. And then Ray Dean, you weren't really with us, but you're just an honorary member because you had that big mayor race, and you should have been in the back of the bus. And when we went through Minneapolis, you were that day. But it was you're part of our team. And even Chair sat back there, which I was honored with because I thought, sure as heck, he becomes chair, he's going to go in the front. He'd get close up there and be up there, but he stuck around with us goofballs, and we learned a lot from each other. But anyways, thank you for that. I want to thank Alice Hausman. I don't know where she is, but it is really an honor to serve with her. She really loves all of us and loves our state. And the staff, our team, Jenny and Gavin, what a fine gentleman. Terrible umpire, I guess, so that's why he's with us. No, he's really a class act, and really nice to know him. And Jennifer, of course, on your team, amazing as well. But it's a good bill, and I think you should give it a shot, and hopefully you can come back a little bit better.
Member from Blue Earth, Representative Munson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. $64,546. That's what every man, woman, and child in this country owes for our debt and the national debt. $21 trillion is what they've run up in debt. And right now we ask ourselves, how did we get here? How did we get here with $21 trillion in national debt? And this is days like us. This is days like this right here that we decide to increase debt, especially in an up economy. I hear the excuses that the interest rates are low, that we need to do this. But this is taking what's left of our budget and trying to go out and find a credit card and get the maximum extended credit we can on our credit card to kick this can down the road. We will never be able to make the hard decisions that we need to make if we still bond for $1 billion or more. And I know that we're under $1 billion now, but every member I've talked to agrees that when this comes back from conference committee, it's going to be over $1 billion. This is not responsible. I'm the only member in this room who has run for election since you guys increased the spending by over 9% last year. And I can tell you that at every door I talked to people, they were concerned about out-of-control spending. And as I look through this bonding bill, I see a lot of items in this bonding bill that are good. We need to invest in our wastewater infrastructure. We need to make improvements in roads and bridges. This is good stuff, but we have a process and we have formulas by which we choose which projects that we should be doing as a state. And instead, we have a bonding bill where legislators get to put in their pet projects in order to pass this bill. This is a frustration of constituents. This is a frustration of people in your district who graduate college with tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and now you're asking them to pay for this for the next 15 or 20 years. My daughter, who's 9 years old, is going to have to pay for this. This is irresponsible spending, and we'll never be able to make the hard decisions unless we stop this out-of-control spending every year. I'm voting no on this bill because I believe it's the fiscal responsible thing to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? For the last word, the member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And of course, I encourage you all to vote for this bill. It is the right thing to do. Now, this is about doing what is good for the state and for your districts. And I talk to my constituents too, and you know something? They want roads. They want wastewater treatment plants. They want clean water to drink. And they don't want their local property taxes increased to pay for it. They want to do it the way that it has historically been done in the state of Minnesota. Now, I urge you again to vote for this because I can't guarantee that you're going to get another chance. This might be it, members. Guess what? You just heard one. I got people over here who don't necessarily want a bonding bill. Fortunately, not all that many. But I can't guarantee that if you vote this thing down, if you vote against the interests of the people of your district, of your state, that you'll get another chance. And I assure you, whether I had an $800 million bonding bill, a $600 million, a billion, or $1.5 billion, given the amount that I'm given, I would do the best that I could do to make sure that my bill was balanced geographically and fairly for my members, Democrat and Republican. It is important to get this bill off the floor today. It is important for you, it is important for your district, for the people that you represent, and it is important for the people of Minnesota who are depending on you to do what is right, and I ask you to vote yes. There it is.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 84 ayes and 39 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to.